My phone pinged as I was signing Leo out of daycare. I glanced at the screen, expecting a routine message from my husband about dinner plans. Moving to Spain with Jackie. I've transferred our savings to my private account. Good luck paying rent. My hands froze mid-signature. Leo tugged at my sleeve, oblivious to how our lives had just imploded. "Mommy, did you bring my dinosaur snacks today?" I forced a smile, completed the sign-out sheet, and typed a response while my mind screamed in disbelief. "Thanks for the update." 3 words that masked the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Jackie was his administrative assistant. Our savings represented 8 years of careful planning and sacrifice. The rent on our Chicago apartment was due in 3 days. My name is Suzanne Mitchell, 37 years old, mother to 4-year-old Leo, and apparently soon-to-be ex-wife of David Mitchell, who had just abandoned us with the casual cruelty of a text message. What I wanted was painfully simple: stability for my son, the dignity of financial security, and the chance to build a life not constantly undermined by David's impulsive decisions. Standing in my way was the immediate crisis of survival: how to keep a roof over our heads when our savings account had been pillaged. "Where's Daddy?" Leo asked as we walked to the car, his small hand trusting in mine. "Is he making spaghetti tonight?" "Daddy's on a trip," I answered, the first of what would likely be many carefully constructed half-truths. "We'll have pizza instead." At home, I tucked Leo in front of his favorite cartoon while I called the bank. The polite representative confirmed my worst fears. David had indeed transferred the entire balance, $42,731, from our joint savings to an account under his name only. Since both our names were on the joint account, there was nothing they could do. It wasn't technically theft in the eyes of the banking system. I opened our checking account online, hoping David had overlooked our day-to-day funds. The balance read $347.12. Our rent was $2,200. As the reality of our situation sank in, my phone lit up with a call from David's mother, Beatrice. "Suzanne, what have you done?" she demanded without preamble. "David says you're refusing to let him see Leo." I struggled to process her words. "What? David just told me he's moving to Spain. He's cleaned out our accounts." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "He showed me the text messages. You're threatening to keep Leo from him unless he pays you more alimony. I've raised a better son than that, and he won't be bullied." As Beatrice continued her tirade, a sickening realization dawned. David wasn't just abandoning us. He was actively creating a fictional narrative where I was the villain. And based on the conviction in his mother's voice, she believed every word. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth, justice, and my son's future. David and I met 9 years ago at a publishing conference in New York. I was an ambitious editor at Horizon Books, while he was working in marketing for a rival publisher. He pursued me with the same charismatic intensity that initially made him successful in his career: handwritten notes, thoughtful gifts, ambitious date plans. Within 6 months, we were married in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan. The first years were good ones. We moved to Chicago for my promotion to senior editor, and David easily found a marketing position at a local firm. We bought a modest condo, traveled occasionally, and planned for our future. When Leo was born 4 years ago, we agreed I would take a step back from work to focus on motherhood while David's career supported us. I transitioned to freelance editing, working from home around Leo's schedule. The shift in our financial dynamic coincided with subtle changes in David's behavior. Small expenses would appear on our credit card without explanation. He began working later, citing the need to make up for your reduced income. His mother, who had always viewed me as somehow beneath her son, became more involved in our lives, often undermining my parenting decisions when she visited. "Leo needs a firmer hand," she would say, while David remained silent. "Suzanne is too soft with him." 2 years ago, we sold our condo and moved to a rental apartment, after David convinced me we could use the equity to invest in his friend's startup. The investment failed within 8 months, but David's explanations about market volatility seemed plausible enough. When I suggested returning to full-time work, he insisted it wasn't necessary and that Leo needed me at home. "Trust me," he would say. "I've got everything under control." I did trust him, though doubts occasionally surfaced. Like when I discovered receipts for dinners on nights he claimed to be working late, or when he became defensive about his phone, keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. Each time, his explanations seemed just reasonable enough to quiet my suspicions. 3 months ago, David announced he'd been offered a promotion that would require occasional international travel. The increased income would help rebuild our savings, he explained. Around the same time, he mentioned Jackie, a new administrative assistant who was amazingly efficient at organizing his schedule. Last week, I found a Barcelona travel guide hidden in his desk drawer. When I asked about it, he laughed it off. The team might open a European office someday. Just doing some preliminary research. I accepted his explanation, ignoring the slight tremor in his voice and the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine. That travel guide should have been my wake-up call. Instead, it became just another warning sign I chose not to see clearly until it was too late. The day after David's devastating text, I dropped Leo at daycare and headed to David's office, determined to confront him in person. Surely he wouldn't simply vanish without properly dissolving our marriage or making arrangements for Leo. The David I married wasn't cruel. Impulsive sometimes, but not heartless. The receptionist's expression shifted from professional welcome to discomfort when I asked for David. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell, but David no longer works here. He resigned last week." "Last week?" My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "That's impossible. He was here Monday." She fidgeted with a pen. "I'm really not supposed to discuss personnel matters, but he submitted his resignation 2 weeks ago. Yesterday was his last day." 2 weeks. While I was planning meals and managing Leo's preschool applications, David had been orchestrating his escape. The receptionist avoided eye contact as I thanked her and walked numbly toward the elevator. In the parking garage, I called David's closest friend, Trevor. "Hey, Suzanne," he answered cautiously. "How are you holding up?" "You knew," I said, realization dawning. "You knew he was planning to leave." Trevor's hesitation confirmed it before he spoke. He made me promise not to say anything, said he needed a clean break. A clean break from his child? My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. From 8 years of marriage? "Look, I'm sorry. I told him it was wrong, but Jackie makes him happy. He said you and Leo would be better off without him dragging you down. Jackie makes him happy." The words cut deeper than they should have. I knew their relationship wasn't just professional, but hearing it confirmed by a mutual friend transformed suspicion into humiliating certainty. "Did he tell you he emptied our bank accounts?" I asked. Trevor's silence spoke volumes. "Christ, Suzanne, I had no idea he'd go that far." His voice dropped. "That's messed up." After ending the call, I sat in my car, the full scope of David's betrayal washing over me. This wasn't an impulsive decision or momentary weakness. It was a calculated escape, meticulously planned while he played the role of committed husband and father. When I arrived home, a certified letter awaited me. Inside was a petition for divorce, filed by David a week earlier, citing irreconcilable differences. The document listed his new address in Barcelona and requested that all parental rights and obligations remain with the mother, with no visitation or custody granted to the father. He was legally abandoning Leo while simultaneously portraying me as the one keeping them apart. Attached was a note from David's lawyer. "Mr. Mitchell has indicated you have substantial savings to cover your needs during this transition. He will not be providing spousal or child support." I slumped onto the couch, documents scattered around me. Every aspect of our life together now appeared as a carefully constructed lie. The man I married, or thought I married, had been plotting his exit for weeks, possibly months, ensuring he escaped with our financial resources while creating a narrative that painted him as the victim. My phone pinged with a message from David. landed in Barcelona. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will handle everything. Anger began to replace shock. For Leo's sake, I needed to think clearly. First step, secure our housing situation before the rent came due. Second, document everything for the divorce proceedings. Third, find a lawyer who could help me navigate this nightmare. For the first time since receiving David's message, I allowed myself to cry, not from heartbreak, but from the overwhelming realization of what I was facing. When the tears subsided, one thought remained clear. David had underestimated me. He had always underestimated me. 3 days after David's departure, I sat across from Vivian Aguilar, a divorce attorney recommended by a college friend. Her office was modest but orderly, much like Vivian herself. "Let me be clear," she said after reviewing my documents. "What your husband did is reprehensible, but not entirely illegal. Since you were married, he had legal access to those joint accounts. Even if he was planning to abandon us?" My voice cracked, despite my efforts to remain composed. "The good news is judges don't look kindly on this kind of behavior. We can petition for emergency child support and potentially freeze any remaining assets." She leaned forward. "What we need is proof that he's continuing to earn income while evading his parental responsibilities." I nodded, already gathering evidence. Screenshots of David's text messages, bank statements showing the massive withdrawal, the certified divorce petition. But finding proof of his current employment seemed impossible from nearly 4,000 miles away. That evening, desperate for short-term solutions, I called my parents in Michigan. They immediately offered to cover my rent and basic expenses until the legal situation improved. "We'll be there tomorrow," my mother said firmly. "You shouldn't be alone right now." Her support loosened something tight in my chest. With Leo safely tucked into bed, I turned my attention to David's abandoned desk. I needed any documentation that might help my case: tax returns, employment contracts, anything that proved his income potential and obligations to Leo. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old warranties, I found a sealed envelope addressed to David's mother. Curiosity overrode my hesitation. Inside was a birthday card and a handwritten note. "Mom, thanks for helping with the Barcelona apartment deposit. Jackie and I can't wait to show you our new place when you visit in May. We couldn't have made this happen without your support. Love, David." The date on the card was from 3 months ago, around the time David had first mentioned his promotion. Beatrice hadn't just known about his plans, she had financially supported them. With shaking hands, I photographed the card and note, then continued searching. Tax returns, investment statements, our marriage certificate. I organized everything methodically. In his email drafts folder on our shared computer, I discovered an unsent message to Jackie with an attached resume, listing his new position at Meridian Global Barcelona, with a start date just 2 days after his text to me. Armed with this crucial evidence, I met with Vivian again. She reviewed everything, her expression growing increasingly determined. "This is exactly what we needed. We can file for emergency orders today: child support, freezing of marital assets, and potentially even an order for him to return to the jurisdiction." Hope flickered for the first time since David's text. What happens next? First, we file the emergency motions. Then, we depose Beatrice about her involvement. If David has started working in Spain while abandoning his child, we'll make sure the court understands exactly what happened. The following day, buoyed by this progress, I received a message from David's lawyer: an offer of $5,000 in full settlement of all claims. "They're testing your desperation," Vivian advised when I forwarded it to her. "Don't engage." That night, I received a direct message from David. "Take the settlement, Suzanne. You won't get more, and fighting will just drain what little I've offered. Be reasonable for once." His condescension ignited a quiet fury. I didn't respond, but I saved the message as evidence of his attitude toward his responsibilities. 2 days later, we secured an emergency hearing date. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Jackie's ex-roommate, Bethany, who had discovered my contact information in Jackie's abandoned belongings. I thought you should know what they were planning, Bethany said, her voice hesitant. Jackie's been talking about this for months, how they were going to start fresh in Spain without any baggage. She even bragged about how David was setting aside money where you couldn't touch it. My momentary optimism crumbled as Bethany continued, describing conversations she'd overheard between Jackie and David about creating offshore accounts and establishing residency in Spain specifically to complicate legal proceedings. They have a whole plan to make fighting them so expensive and difficult that you'll eventually give up, Bethany concluded. I'm sorry. I just thought you deserved to know what you're up against. The morning of our emergency hearing, I woke to another text from David. I hear you're dragging Mom into this. Bad move, Suzanne. Drop this now, or I'll make sure you regret it. His threat strengthened my resolve. In the courthouse, Vivian and I waited outside the assigned courtroom, reviewing our presentation one final time. The doors opened and David's lawyer emerged, a polished man in an expensive suit who exuded confidence. Mrs. Mitchell, he nodded curtly. Mr. Hoffman, representing David Mitchell. Before I could respond, an unexpected figure appeared behind him. Beatrice, immaculately dressed and wearing the same disapproving expression she'd directed at me for years. You should be ashamed, she hissed, ignoring Vivian's warning hand on my arm. Trying to extort my son when you're the one who drove him away. Mrs. Mitchell, Vivian interjected smoothly. Since you're here, I should inform you that we'll be calling you as a witness regarding your financial support of your son's abandonment of his family. Beatrice's face paled slightly, but she maintained her composure. I have no idea what you're talking about. The hearing proceeded with clinical efficiency. The judge listened to both arguments, reviewed our evidence of David's withdrawal of funds and new employment, and granted our emergency motions. David would be required to provide immediate child support and return a portion of the marital assets while the case proceeded. It felt like a significant victory, but Beatrice's unexpected appearance troubled me. Why had she flown to Chicago for a routine emergency hearing? That question was answered the next day when I received a call from an unknown international number. Is this Suzanne Mitchell? A woman's accented voice inquired. Yes, who's calling? My name is Lucia Vega, HR Director at Meridian Global Barcelona. I'm calling about your husband, David Mitchell. My heart raced. Yes? We received your email about his employment situation. I wanted to inform you that Mr. Mitchell no longer works for Meridian Global. He was terminated yesterday. I frowned in confusion. I didn't send any email. There was a pause. Someone using your name sent documentation showing Mr. Mitchell was involved in a custody dispute and had pending legal issues in the United States. Company policy requires disclosure of such matters during the hiring process. The realization hit me. Beatrice. She had impersonated me to sabotage David's employment, ensuring he couldn't comply with the court's support order. It was a calculated move to undermine the judge's ruling and validate David's claim that he couldn't afford to support Leo. Ms. Vega, I did not send that email. Could you forward it to me? Minutes later, I was staring at a message allegedly from me, filled with distorted half-truths about David's situation and threatening the company with legal action if they continued employing him. The email included copies of our personal documents, some of which I'd only recently gathered from my attorney. My apartment had been untouched, which meant only one person could have accessed those documents, Beatrice, during her visit to support me after David left. I immediately called Vivian, who validated my suspicions. This is identity fraud and interference with a court order. We need to document everything and file additional motions. While we were developing this new strategy, my phone rang again. David, calling directly for the first time since his departure. You vindictive bitch, he snarled without preamble. You got me fired? After everything I offered you? It wasn't me, David. It was your mother. His momentary silence confirmed he recognized the possibility. That's absurd. Why would she do that? To make you look unable to pay support, to undermine the court order, to turn you further against me. You're lying, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Mom would never... Check your emails. Look at the documents that were sent. Those were in my apartment until your mother visited last week. The line went silent for several seconds. I'll call you back, he finally said. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with an email from David containing a bombshell, a series of text messages between him and Beatrice revealing a disturbing truth. This wasn't just about David leaving, it was about eliminating me from the picture entirely. Once you're established in Spain, Beatrice had written 3 months earlier, we can work on getting full custody of Leo. With Suzanne's history of depression after his birth, we can make a case that she's unstable. My postpartum depression, which I'd fought through with therapy and David's apparent support, had been weaponized against me all along. The revelation of Beatrice and David's long-term plot to gain custody of Leo transformed the battlefield. This wasn't merely about financial survival anymore. It was about protecting my son from people who viewed him as a possession to be claimed rather than a child to be nurtured. Vivian immediately filed additional motions documenting Beatrice's identity fraud and the conspiracy to manipulate custody arrangements. We also reported the identity theft to the police, creating an official record of Beatrice's illegal actions. We've strengthened our position considerably, Vivian assured me. But David still has the advantage of physical distance and most of your marital assets. I knew we needed something more. Undeniable evidence that would convince a judge to freeze all of David's assets and potentially compel his return to the United States. The text messages proved conspiracy, but not the location of our missing savings. In a moment of inspiration, I contacted Trevor again. I need your help, I said without preamble. For Leo's sake. Trevor's guilt over his silent complicity in David's plans made him receptive. What do you need? Information. David must have told you more about his financial arrangements, where he was moving the money, how he planned to support himself in Spain. There was a long pause. He mentioned an account in the Cayman Islands, said his mom helped him set it up years ago for tax purposes. I didn't think much of it at the time. Did he mention the bank name? Any details at all? First Caribbean International, I think. Look, Suzanne, I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. I never thought he'd leave Leo completely. This new information gave us a starting point, but we needed details. Account numbers, transfer records, anything that would concretely tie David to hidden assets. I remembered that David had always used variations of the same password for his accounts, generally involving Leo's birth date and our anniversary. With trembling fingers, I tried accessing his cloud storage using the most likely combination. To my shock, it worked. Inside were folders meticulously organizing his escape, screenshots of transfer confirmations, correspondence with Beatrice about the offshore account, even a document titled Custody Strategy, outlining their plan to paint me as an unstable mother once Leo was brought to Spain. I immediately forwarded everything to Vivian, who called back within the hour, her voice tense with controlled excitement. This is exactly what we needed. I'm filing for emergency orders freezing the Cayman account and requesting international enforcement. 2 days later, we received our first major victory. The judge granted our motion to freeze David's offshore account pending further investigation. David's lawyer immediately filed a counter-motion accusing me of illegal hacking, which momentarily threatened our progress. Then came the unexpected complication. Jackie called me directly. Suzanne, we need to talk, she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. David's falling apart here. That's not my concern anymore. Please, she insisted. He's talking about flying back to Chicago to fix things with you directly. I'm worried about what he might do. A chill ran through me. David had never been physically violent, but his current desperation made him unpredictable. Why are you telling me this, Jackie? Because this isn't what I signed up for. He promised a fresh start, not a man obsessing over his ex-wife and hiding money from me too. Her words caught me off guard. He's hiding money from you? He has another account I just found out about. After the judge froze the Cayman account, He told me we'd be fine because he has backup funds his mother doesn't even know about. This was potentially crucial information, but I sensed Jackie wasn't sharing out of pure altruism. "What do you want, Jackie?" "Protection," she said simply. "When David finds out I've talked to you, he'll turn on me too. I need assurance that I won't face legal consequences for my role in this. I can't promise anything without consulting my attorney." "Then figure it out quickly," she replied, "because David booked a flight to Chicago for tomorrow. And Suzanne? He seemed different when he told me. Scary different." After consulting with Vivian, we crafted a proposal: immunity for Jackie in exchange for complete documentation of all accounts and a sworn statement about David and Beatrice's conspiracy. Jackie agreed immediately, sending bank statements showing a second account in Liechtenstein containing the bulk of our marital assets, over $200,000. With this final piece of evidence, we secured an emergency restraining order just hours before David's scheduled arrival in Chicago. When his plane landed, airport security would be waiting. David's return to Chicago unfolded exactly as we had planned. Airport security detained him upon landing, serving him with both the restraining order and court summons for an emergency hearing the following morning. His phone call to me from the airport security office vibrated with barely controlled rage. "What the hell is this, Suzanne?" "I came back to work things out." "With a one-way ticket and no hotel reservation?" I countered, Jackie's intelligence having proved accurate. "The court hearing is at 9 tomorrow. I suggest you find a lawyer." In the courtroom, David appeared disheveled and defensive, clearly unprepared for the mountain of evidence we presented: the offshore accounts, the identity fraud, the custody conspiracy, and most damning, Jackie's sworn statement detailing how he had planned the abandonment for months while systematically hiding marital assets. The judge's expression grew increasingly severe as Vivian methodically built our case. When she presented the custody strategy document outlining their plans to use my postpartum depression against me, David visibly wilted. "Your Honor," Vivian concluded, "we request immediate return of all marital assets, full custody of the minor child to my client, supervised visitation only for the father, and a forensic accounting of all funds hidden by Mr. Mitchell and his mother." When David's hastily retained attorney attempted to paint me as the aggressor who had forced David to protect his assets, the judge cut him off. "Counsel, I've reviewed the evidence. Your client systematically defrauded his wife, abandoned his child, and conspired to manipulate this court. Save your creative interpretations." The judge's ruling was comprehensive. All identified accounts were frozen and placed under court supervision. David's passport was confiscated pending resolution of the financial issues. Temporary full custody was granted to me, and a referral was made to the district attorney's office to investigate potential criminal charges against both David and Beatrice for identity fraud and conspiracy. As David stared at me across the courtroom, I met his gaze steadily, no longer the desperate woman he had expected to find. In his eyes, I saw the dawning realization that his carefully constructed escape had become his prison. In the months following the court's ruling, the full consequences of David's actions unfolded with a certain poetic justice. The forensic accounting uncovered not just our marital assets, but additional funds Beatrice had hidden for tax purposes. Both faced civil penalties. Beatrice was also charged with identity fraud for impersonating me to Meridian Global. David's attempts to rebuild his life in Chicago floundered. His industry reputation was tarnished by the public court records detailing his abandonment and financial dishonesty. Jackie returned to Spain alone, her immunity agreement having served its purpose for both of us. The divorce finalized with terms heavily favoring me and Leo. Full custody with David granted only supervised visitation, which he rarely exercised. Complete restoration of our marital assets plus legal fees, and substantial child support indexed to David's future earnings to prevent him from deliberately remaining underemployed. Most satisfying was watching Beatrice's carefully constructed social facade crumble when her country club friends discovered she had committed identity fraud to sabotage her own son's employment. The woman who had judged me for years now faced judgment from her peers. 6 months after David's text upended our lives, Leo and I moved into a small but comfortable condo purchased with the recovered funds. A home that was truly ours, with no shadows of betrayal lingering in its corners. "Is Daddy ever coming to visit?" Leo asked one evening as I tucked him into his new dinosaur-themed bedroom. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly, "but we're going to be okay either way." And we were. I returned to full-time editing with a publishing house that offered flexible hours for parents. Leo thrived in his new preschool. The acute pain of David's betrayal gradually transformed into something quieter, a hard-earned wisdom about resilience and self-reliance. Sometimes life's cruelest moments become unexpected catalysts for growth. David's parting text, "Good luck paying rent," had been intended as a devastating final blow. Instead, it became the first line of a story about finding strength I never knew I possessed.